And we'll get started. So again, thank you everybody for joining one more time. Last time, I promise. The topic today is Workamajig Administration, Backend Administrator. So we want to just show you and highlight some things. You may know these, you guys may probably be experts on this, but we really thought that, with new clients or with users that are taking over the administration position, or those that are looking for a refresher, that you guys can take advantage of these webinars, or this particular webinar on this topic. That way you know what to look for, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know we had this. Let's take advantage of it. We were looking for this, but we didn't know how to ask for it. So that's what we're going to do here. So I accidentally clicked on my menu. So hopefully you guys are all able to log into your instance. Hopefully you're administrators or you're helping out administrators in the system, and you know what the screens look like. So we're not going to do that. Obviously start you from scratch. But what I wanted to also mention is that there's going to be screens that I'm going to show, and I won't be able to go through every single thing that appears on the screen just because it doesn't apply. It may have more applied to a different webinar or a different conversation or topic. But I can address questions when there are questions, and I can briefly give you a blurb, and maybe things that maybe I didn't even know, or you found something, pointed it out, or maybe I'm stumped, and that's okay. But we also have your account team, your account managers that you're assigned to, that you can follow up with questions on, and go further in. So, okay, enough prep. So we're here in the well, this is my sandbox. I use it to present, to play with, so excuse the mess. But one of the topics that we wanted to share with you is just that when you are an administrator, you should see the full menu. This is the full menu here. To administer the system, obviously I would click on the admin icon here to get to the folders, and I'm going to start with the system setup. So I'm going to start there. And so the idea here is that I want to point out some things to look out for as you're either reviewing your setup or working on your setup, or what do I have set up, right? Now, like I said, I'm not going to touch on every single thing here, but as administrators, what I think for a function or more of tips or tricks here is that we really want you to be aware of transaction preferences under the system options. When I train new clients, I will tell them not to worry about this one. Why? Because they may not know exactly what those things in here mean, what they represent, how they change or affect the system, how we've placed it for them to do that. But for you guys, you may have differences in the setup that I have and have amongst each other. And so this is a great time to discuss that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that here. And I actually want to point something out right off the bat without even getting into some of these modules here on this new screen. When we start you off, we actually start you off with this view that I'm toggling by this blue link at the bottom. Again, we don't want to scare off new clients with too many options. We also don't want to get them too much into, or get them into too much trouble if they're changing things but not knowing what's happening. So what I'm doing here is just letting you know that you can now, obviously, if you haven't clicked on it, you can show more options that'll take you to the screen. And it'll remember the option you left. So mine has always been this one, right? Because I'm very comfortable in the system. But, and it's obviously for your own, the memory of that the system has is just for your own view. So if you are having more than one administrator, which by the way, you can have more than one administrator in the system. I have had clients that if they're small enough, everybody's an administrator. I know, right? Maybe it's not what everyone would do, but maybe it's just so that everyone just has access and they don't feel like there's any obstacles with it. But that's the point of these options, right? Is to allow some people to manage the system and allow other people just to do and not change things for the rest of the people if that's not their role. The other thing that I want to point out that's not written, at least, is that a lot of times my clients will say, hey, who changed something? How can I see that? Well, we don't want to do that. I guess we're not in the business of title telling. But what we'd like for you to do is just be aware of that, and we'll talk about this also later, or at least briefly enough later, is that if you're allowing someone to be in here because they're an administrator, or you've given them rights to administer the system in a different way, there's the trust. We're not going to go and say, Mandy, check this box on this date, and then Roger checked it off on that date. We're not interested in that. So just wanting you to be aware of that. Now, when you put that power in your user's hands, it's because you guys are talking and discussing the options, and then we're hoping that it's a collective decision on these settings and not just one person, unless it is just one person or a small group. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some of these here. So there's a few things that I will not talk about and some things that I will in regards to these options that are listed here. So I'm actually going to jump to the one that I do want to talk about, which is going to be the clients. Now, and then that's actually more in the middle here. So when you have, you're setting up, or you are interested in or wondering why is my client set up when I create a new client or new project doing something, it's because it's looking at the global settings here for the purpose of, obviously, if I'm creating a client, what's the billing method? Again, not that I want to discuss billing right now, right? But here are some options that you can think about. Oh, okay, that's where it gets it from. I didn't know that. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Same thing with the defaults, but obviously these ones are going to be able to be overwritten if the client itself, once you already have the client record, has some instructions, or if you're pulling from a template. And again, not that I want to drive the discussion of, the nuances of, well, in this scenario, that scenario. I just want you to know this is where it starts, and why transaction preference is really what the purpose is, or what that defines more of the defaults from a global setting, but then giving you the idea or the map or design that we then allow these other records to supersede what's in here, right? If they have those instructions. If they don't, then they're getting them from this area. Okay. So then I'm going to go ahead and click on projects. And I'm actually here going to talk about just this top half of it. That's more applicable. So again, I'm creating a new project. Why do I see the things that I see? Why does it allow me to do things that allows me to do? Well, it's because of the options that you see here. So sometimes my clients will say, I want to see this field. I want this field to be forced on the user, so that if they don't fill it out, it doesn't allow them to do that. So required fields will be listed here, allowing you to maybe copy things from other projects as you're creating new projects. That's what the copy is for. And then the other thing major here that I like to point out is, there's going to be clients that I have or that we have that are using features that not everybody's using. But there may be times where you yourselves may want to be listed as representatives of the client, whether because you want to be, or you want to have one of your employees be in the primary contact, whether you obviously, hopefully, right, that we use the account manager field as the primary default field for everything or in regards to projects. But then we also allow you, if you didn't know, to have a secondary field for project manager, or to designate someone else to be a project manager and those defaults. So you can come in here to play with that and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know we could use that field. That's going to help us a lot. We do have an account manager that's dealing with the client, but then we obviously want someone else to delegate or to manage the project itself. So those are the major points here for the screen. Other screens across, or other sections here, we'll talk about numbering transactions. Hey, where does that come from? Projects, invoices, other records, they'll be part of that information here. I'm not going to scroll down on the screen because that's going to throw this train off the tracks. So we'll go to another one. I want to talk about just the same thing with estimates. I bring you to these just because to highlight, oh, I didn't know I could default approvers for transactions or records. And this is a place where I can do that. And it's going to give me those instructions based on what I've decided to set up in these settings. Again, globally, it's pulling from here, and then the numbering system. So just wanted to point that out with estimates. Now this one with timesheets, same idea. Obviously, we're not, giving a unique identifier for the timesheet. That should be the date, right? But I do want to point out a couple of things. So besides the more basic, more direct, you do have the ability, in this case, to what do I want to say? Allow timesheets to overlap. Now that's a big one for my clients and just the system for you to know. So we want to be able to help your users who are entering time to enter time without making as many mistakes as they could, right? With the system, whether you're allowing them in whatever way that you're allowing them to do so. But there may be times where, you or your user may forget to enter time. Maybe there's a need to fix something. And so we have this feature off by default, like as I have it, so that we can keep those records clean and we know that there's only one timesheet per day. But if you have talked to your account manager, which is always what I will mention as my small print in this whole session, before you change anything, right, is to say, okay, I'm interested in doing this, or why is this here, or maybe it can help us. But there may be times where, there's the timesheets get approved, get submitted, get approved, get processed, they get billed. And as you may know or may not know, that locks up the timesheet. One of the biggest things that we hear back from our clients is, I can't edit my timesheet. I can't edit someone else's timesheet. And we tell them, yes, it is a rule by design that if you bill or close your project that's linked to a timesheet entry on that timesheet, it locks the timesheet. So if you need to make a change, you have to undo the billing, undo the project closing, or a transaction has been billed. And clients that, you guys know, that's a lot of work. We don't want to do that, and we get it. And before we turn this on, I would say, because this is going to allow you to then have a new timesheet for that same day with the correction, you can just choose to, again, for the week, maybe, because again, maybe it's just the next day, just put in a negative amount. Obviously, if you're adding more time, you add a different amount, right? And you're transferring time by lowering buckets and increasing buckets on a different timesheet. And if you're okay with that, then that's perfect. Then you get to still keep your rules of, one timesheet per day situation. But if that still doesn't work, then that's where this comes in. So just want to point that out to you. It's pretty big. And as an administrator, again, for the purposes of this call, I think it's good to know. I'm also not trying to tell you, please turn that on. It's going to save you time, because it is technically a workaround and a solution to something that we really didn't design primarily the system to do, but it's available after you discussed it again with us and or with your team. Okay. So that's a pretty big one. And then we are going to, I don't know if anyone's using timers, but there's some timers options here of how it works. That's well, you have it there. At the bottom here, again, same thing. We designed the system, or by default, have it to have daily timesheets. When your team or your users go enter time, you're going to see a daily, today is Tuesday, so today's, rows of time entries. You can change it to where it's weekly. It is going to obviously then display the full week. And then you can determine when the timesheet week starts on right here. There's nothing wrong with that. This one's a little different. This one's not as hardcore as the one that I talked about before with the overlapping timesheets. Just what happens though is that, I know I enter, I see my clients enter timesheets, so I know that, but I don't remember what I eat, what I ate for lunch the previous day. I have to think about it 2 days ago, even worse. Don't even ask me what I did on Friday. So that's where it gets a little tricky, because now you're allowing your team to have that leeway of Monday through Friday, let's say. And then they're, maybe they're submitting information that's not as accurate on a Friday when they don't remember what happened on Monday. So daily timesheets is a better way to keep them on the straight and narrow, but again, it's up to you. This one's again a little more softer on what you guys can set up here. And again, I'll bring it up later, or at least mention it more, but there are settings, and this is not the call to discuss it or the webinar to discuss it, where you can receive notifications of, timesheets not submitted, timesheets, not completed or not entered as to the amount of hours you wanted your team to have, and there's notifications that go out for that. And again, do you want to wait till the end of that week to, handle that, or is it better to have it, be daily notifications and daily submissions? So something to think about and discuss, right? We do have this other area here for tracking tardiness. This is just more, again, not in the business of title telling. This is more because we allow the setting to be here, and then there are some reports. And again, fortunately not something that we're going to get into with reporting today, but there are some fields, some data fields that can track, when timesheets were submitted versus when they were created, right? So that way you can report off of that, I guess. Again, we're not trying to do that, but we got enough feedback from our clients that we did set this up for them. So those are those here. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to the next, which is similar to the estimates. There's, where's the number record? What are some defaults? So that's available there. Not going to jump or, get too crazy into those. I'm going to skip into the client invoices and vendor invoices again. Not that I want to go into the details of everything here, but with the default approvers and the numbering, that's where those exist for both client and vendor invoices. So I'll click on that, see that. Hey, where does it get this information from? There, here you go. Okay. Now I do want to talk about these last two here on this screen. So I talked about timesheet notifications. We do have other notifications in the system. This is where you set up when those messages get sent out. If it's blank, it's not going to get sent out. Obviously, if it's a future date, it'll wait for that date to send those out. Also, my point or purpose of showing you this is not to talk about each of these, but for you to be aware of where you control them. But the idea in this particular screen is that these will link to the employee notification section, which we will visit later. But it is so that you can know, okay, I've flicked these preferences or options on for these users versus these other users. Why are they not sending? Oh, that's right, I gotta come in here to make them happen, and this is when they're gonna go out. And as you can see in like this third option, you can select on some of these the frequency when they do go out. Maybe again, wants to match with your timesheet frequency, and or just whenever you want to receive those notifications. And then obviously it will either go to, and it'll have that in the blurb and on our help guide article that dives deeper into the setup for this, whether it goes to the manager or it goes to the approver or it goes to the person whose timesheet that belongs to. So there's other things too, but just wanted to show you this is the sort of our daily email, quote unquote daily, can be other frequency control of that, those notifications. But those are for the employee part. This other part underneath here is the notification options. So we did put here for the records of approvals like client invoices, vendor invoices, etc. If you are requiring comments on those based on the other settings, whether you're going to also show them if you're not requiring them. You may have noticed that when your team is approving things, that comment box comes up or disappears. So that's where this gets controlled. But the real purpose of this screen is to also control the notification process. So we do have the daily emails that's mentioned here, new records, approvals, and conversations. We allow you to select to whether it's just going to be all email, whether it's going to be a system message, which I'll talk about in just a second, or both. So obviously email makes sense. Both obviously includes email. What is system message? Well, in Workamajig, we allow you to have this bell icon, which if you, as a refresher, it is used for actionable items. So I have quite a bit that I haven't addressed, unfortunately. But if I click on it, it's going to tell me I have all these approvals. So that makes up most of it. Or I have submissions that were rejected, or I have items that I've yet to submit, which is usually my timesheet. And then I have other things. Most of them seems to be credit card charges, but I have these messages that appear here. And so you'll notice that, again, not to dive into the details here, but I do have the system telling me that I have an issue with my credit card setup, and I'm getting these messages every day. So I am getting an email. Apparently I'm ignoring it, but this is where those system messages will come in as well to tell me that I have them, and then I can go ahead and click on them and it'll give me the message here. Okay, and so whether it's an automated message from the machine and it clears those, or whether I go to see a message from a conversation, that's why you're seeing these messages, and also because I have both, or at least including the system messages for those, right? So again, where does this drive? Where is this coming from? It's coming from here. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Anything else that I wanted to discuss in this area? The one thing that jumping out of this page, transaction preferences, and I am gonna, let's see if we're still good on questions. Yes. Okay. Is that we also offer you, besides the preferences, the ability to control the rights and access of your users. I hope you know that we do place everyone in security groups. That makes it easier for you as administrators. If you have a new hire, let's say, hey, you're going to be part of the security group. I don't have to go and check all your boxes on. I just assign you to that group and you're good to go. This is the backend where you can see those groups under security settings. These are my groups. And as I highlight them, different people will appear here. And the thing to note here is that it gets from some normal labels, as you would expect, to some interesting ones. And I do that just want to point things out that the label that you have doesn't define what they have access to. And you maybe already knew that, maybe you didn't, maybe it's a refresher. But your team has the ability to update these names, but you could have called them, you know, rock, paper, scissors, banana, apple, orange. It's the boxes that are checked on here once you have them highlighted that really gives them that. And then what we've done is when we set up these instances for your use, for you to use, we give them labels that make sense and that correlate with the boxes that we've heard from you as feedback or we see clients need based on that security group, which obviously matches a role that they play in using Workamajig or in your process. So that's why we label them that way, but you have the ability to change them. You can see that if highlighted or checked, I can delete it. I can also make a copy, and that's how you add new ones, because who wants to start from scratch? As you can see, the scroll bar is really tiny out of all the things that are on here. And again, some clients will say to me, hey, I'm either new or we're relearning Workamajig, and can I have a list of all these rights? We do have it in our help guide. You can print these out now, so you can do that too. Does it really help you? I mean, I don't know. I don't think I've seen or heard that it does. But there's hundreds of rows here. What we'd rather you do is, again, have the discussion with us and what they mean. This is obviously not the call to go through 200 rows of this, but it is just to make you aware that if you're not an administrator, you have to have these boxes on or off to allow you to do things in Workamajig. And that's what defines what that user group is going to be able to do. I do want to point out, since we're here, there's a search tool to help you put keywords in here. Again, I call it the Workamajig language. Maybe we call things that maybe not what they're usually called. We try to make them to that they're relatable to our system and our, advertising and the ad world there. But the other thing to point out is that we have this other tab for client rights. Since we're here, I'd like to address it. If you are using our client portal feature, that's what those rights are for. And why I point that out is because for those of you who are interested in that or are already using that, just to remember that if it's a full user, these are the boxes that it looks at. But if you want to, I don't know, save yourself the trouble of creating a whole security group to have a different set of rights that you then administer here, that's fine. But you could just combine that, and then your free users that are in the system, which again, different topics. I can't really get into much of that right now. These are the rights to get them to do things in that limited access that they have. So that's what that's for. And then the other things that are on here that I point out is based on the group that you're in, and I'm going to work my way from the bottom up on the right, you can select what calendars they can access or interact with, whether it's to view or edit those. And again, different discussion on calendar management, but that's where you can get to define them. The access, same thing with system rights. Hey, who's in this group? I need to see that they can add files to projects and campaigns, or add folders where they'll put files for projects and campaigns in here. And once you have updated that, you then need to save. And then you do need to click on this blue link to update that for your for across the system. So I do see some questions, so I'm excited. So I'm going to go and look at them. Why is the client's rights different for each security group? Great question. So the reason why it's different is because you may have more than one group of clients or free logins if you're using that feature, and you may need to separate their access. And so again, I have clients as that security group, and this means nothing to them. There's only this, because I'm not going to assign anyone that's an employee to this because I didn't care to. I could have, but I call this clients, and so I care about this. But again, our system doesn't care what you call this. Rock, paper, scissors, a banana, orange, my wonderful examples that I use. So it just needs to know if I assign orange as a security group to the client portal for my clients, what can they do? Because I've made that connection. Hopefully that helps answer that question. But this client rights and full user rights depends on the label here, and not so much that this carries across all. It's really to that label. So I'm drawing an imaginary arrow back and forth here. And then another question here, can you copy a security group and then edit it to make a new one? Yes. So I would, copy Patty's, and it's going to say, you sure? I say yes. Now I have Patty's copy, and then I can edit the name and everything to make a new one. So that's how you would create a new security group, by copying it. So that's we killed two birds with one stone. Good. Next question. So we're gonna get to your question here about security levels next. So let me go ahead and show you that. I'm gonna mark these guys done, and so that I don't forget. And so let's talk about security levels. So the question was security levels. Where in the world is that? Oh, I kind of see it's right here. So I'm gonna click on this pencil icon to get into this whole thing. So here's where you edit the name of the group. Copied from another one. So, hey, it's whatever I want. Now, what does this mean? If you have assigned this or any of these groups, and we're talking about this one now, to have a right that says, oh, help me manage the employees, so maybe you're the admin and you're asking this group of people to help you manage employees. Maybe they're your, sub-administrators, maybe they're part of your account managers and you want to allow them to help you out a little bit, however you want to set up that group. by selecting the levels here, you're saying, okay, you can manage other employees as long as you have a higher level than that other group of employees. So if I'm this security group and all of mine are set to 1 because it's just my sandbox. So if I want this group to manage everybody else, I got to make sure that they're set on a 2 at least, or a 3 or a 4. We give you a few options. So that's the whole point. It's just for when you're managing employees, not for setting up the system, managing it at all. No, it's just employee records. So hopefully that answers your question. If you do need that set up, again, make everyone lowest, which is the whole point, and then make them, a 2 or higher, and then they'll be able to help you out. That's the kicker there. Good questions. Good questions. You can also, we've set up some settings here to allow the menu background image to change, but to note that we also allow the individual user to make changes to that. Again, I'll bring up that later. There's also some settings here about what default page that group is going to arrive in Workamajig. Again, I'll mention that briefly, but you may have noticed with Workamajig, we're browser-based. If you're new or maybe you haven't touched it, everybody logs usually into the Today Creatives page. So that's where you can change that, in this case, to that particular group, and then you pick the group page based on what's on the menu for them to access. I'm getting into this one a lot, but it really isn't as necessary, I would say, because they can also override it for themselves. And I'm going to talk about some of those individual rights that they have access to. And then also, and obviously it makes sense if they know what they want, right? They'll set it up for them. You're just kind of helping set up the system here. If you're an existing user, you may, be upsetting some people if you're making changes like that without asking them or letting them know, but they'll just change it back to just their own in their own settings page. But that's why that stuff is here. What I really did want to talk about in this one is that this also sets up the datasets access. So long story short, Workamajig offers you custom reporting, right? And one of the tenets with Workamajig is that all the records or all the data is based in datasets, data groups. So when they can access those datasets, they can interact with those custom reports, and this is where you can hide them or show them to them. So just an FYI, we've got quite a bit of security groups here datasets to pick from. So, but that's what's in this page. So I will not save, and I'll delete Patty's so I can use that again later. Last thing on here, well, 2 things actually, left. So I've shown you the rights by group. You can also see them by right. Makes it easier. Hey, who has this right? These groups and these people. So it's combining that. That's really nice. Sometimes I like looking at it that way. And then the other thing that I like or wanted to show you is that we have these global options. Pretty straightforward. The top part, if you're in the employee settings, you can set up passwords. So you can be pretty strict on those passwords. And so you can set that up here, including lockouts or logouts. And so that's available. And then at the bottom, I just wanted you to know some of these things maybe not as valid anymore. We had transitioned to Platinum a few years back, and so we still have the setting to make sure that they were using Platinum. That's no longer necessary, but it's still an option here. One of the things that a lot of clients don't know or didn't know or could use or is managing when someone emails you or calls you and says, I forgot my password, I logged myself out, I don't remember, and you have to go in there and do it for them. Well, you now have an option here to allow the system to display a button for them at the login to request an email so they can reset their own password. So we think that's pretty big, even though it's not a major shocking thing, but hopefully you guys can now use that and resolve those. Your users can resolve those issues themselves. Okay. So that's really the big one at the bottom here. Again, everything else I would have you discuss that as a different topic or different webinar. So that's security settings. Let's see here. So what I like to do is go next to and I guess in this screen here, since we're still in the system setup, there are this is more like an honorable mention just because I'm trying to also make time for other things here. We do have other tabs or features here. Most of this should already be set up along with your system, or you're setting it up now if you're new. So your account manager or your trainer is going through these with you. But if you ever wanted to know where a dropdown comes from, this is where those dropdowns come from. So project statuses, if your team is interested in dividing up your users, departments, if your team is interested in grouping projects another different way, offices, these do touch into the financials or accounting. So again, those should have come up when you're training. And if you're an existing client and you maybe weren't using those features are here. But again, I just don't have the time to dive into a lot of what this is. But the tables are here. So if you ever see those, and then besides this area or of lists, the one thing that I did want to briefly point out to you is we have the ability to manage custom reports or lists that you are running that you've scheduled. And long story short on that, you can automate reports to run and email you daily, weekly at a frequency in certain format to certain people. And those are done at the custom report level or at the list level. And again, not something I can get into today, but for those of you who are using those or once you use them, this is where you can see the list to say, what is happening? Why am I getting this email? It's because of this list and when it happens and to who it's going and all that good stuff. So you can then click into them and administer to them by changing the settings or altogether deleting that run. And maybe, you need to create a new one. You can also do this from the individual reports, but you have to know which one is doing that. And so that's a little harder. And that's why this screen is really good for you to manage those. Again, I'm giving you a tip on the fact that custom reports can be scheduled, but this is not the call to discuss them, just knowing that where you can manage them. So that's what these skets are for. You're going to be able to set up, for the CRM tool. Again, more drop downs. That's where they exist. For reporting purposes, they can be pulled into data sets, and you can create your own lists here. When you get into billing, this is where you'll see that. The reason why I bring it here is because this is where you manage your lists of labor categories. We call them services. I call them talents. I call them labels for time entry. That's what makes Workamajig tick when it comes to timesheets. Again, not the time to dive into them, but just to see them there. Same thing with purchasing. Your expense categories, your purchase item categories are here. The media ones will be there. But I really want to come down to the bottom half here. So I'm going to skip media because it's really more like purchasing. There's a lot of stuff here for general ledger things. And again, that's not the purpose of this webinar to get into the details of it. All I wanted to tell you is that we did nest a few options that I think you as administrator should be aware of. When you click on the tracking options here, the only thing to be aware of is that you can control, or this is where the control comes from for if I see in a record that I can select an office from the drop downs from other places, it's because of this, or I can require them. Departments, tasks, items. So that's what those are for here. The class is a legacy item. I mentioned it, but because I'm showing the screen, but I definitely don't want to talk about it right now. But that's what makes those records have those things. whether, if you ever see a screenshot of you're taking another webinar and you're like, where is it? Oh, it's right here. Somebody turned it off. Again, like, don't know who did it, but I know where I can fix it. It's coming from this side. So that's where we've nested those, because like I mentioned, they do relate more with financials. This is in the backend where you manage your project requests, your spec sheets, and those custom fields that relate to those requests. Again, I can't talk about them today, but I did want to mention that I do have clients that will ask, hey, how do I get a new field in Workamajig? And so as administrators, you have the ability, and obviously other people that maybe have the same rights to get in here, to add custom fields to records. And you can see that we've broken it up into the data sets and divisions that exist in Workamajig. And these custom fields, just briefly, allow you to set up drop downs or text boxes or radial buttons or text fields, and set them up here. Again, my point wasn't to teach you how to set up a custom field, just to tell you this is where they are. If you ever wanted to know how they're being used, sometimes in the edit button, it may say, obviously, the employee field. Sometimes though, with other fields like project fields or contact fields or company fields, they may have maybe that connection, but it really is more for the tracking. Which project requests are they being used at for that specific data set? We have a separator there. So that's what it's for. But if you ever want to know or how it's back there, that's where you maintain them. So, all right. I do want to move on. I think we're good with questions. I do want to talk about the employee settings. So let me go ahead and go back to my main menu, click on employees, and discuss this. So this is my sandbox again, fake records here. The first thing that I want to point out to you is, again, at any point you have a table, you have a more button. And if you're an administrator, you have the ability to click on system settings. If not, it's one of the rights in the security groups for your users. And obviously, if they don't have them, they don't see that. They see each more button has different options. This employee listings, this employee screen has just views, which just for those who don't know, it's just a list of records. It's just a listable screen. But the reason why I bring you up to system settings is because whenever you have a table and you can click on system settings, you can edit the columns for that table. So all of these boxes that are checked, that's what you're seeing across my table. You can set up for anyone that has access to the screen or for those specific users. So again, my Patty's copy, right? Those were that were going to help me. Maybe I don't want them to have too much access, or at least visibly here, to just see things, so I can customize this view for them. They can still get in here again with rights. They'll be limited to what they can and cannot set up. But going back to the table, once I have my boxes of the fields that I want to show here, then I can select the order by dragging and dropping them in the order that I want them to appear. So that's very important, because you'll see that everywhere. Whenever there's a table, that's what it's for. And yeah, so let me click on SparkBulb here. Pretty straightforward. Everybody here that, when you're entering employee information, you're going to be asked a series of questions or fields. You're going to see those that are required, those are not. But for what we've talked about so far, I do want to point out that in security controls, you have to be an administrator to make another administrator, and that box right here is the box for a true administrator. Some of you may have noticed that we start you off with a security group called administrator, and I don't think I have mine. Yep, I still have mine, and I like to point out that that doesn't make you an administrator. It's this box. Again, these are just labels. My rock, paper, scissors example comes back, right? So that's what makes it, and just being aware of that. Please note also that for us as account managers or Workamajig, that lets us know that you're a decision maker. So if that person is calling or asking for help or making a change, they're an administrator, unless you've told us otherwise. So just be aware of that. So if it's not in your file, right? And then obviously, we would like for you to have at least one backup. You know, someone's on vacation, someone wins a lottery and you never hear from them and they're an administrator. Well, you know, now we have to figure out who we can talk to if there was only one. So you guys help us out a lot by having at least two, just in case. So, and hopefully they didn't also win the lottery. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to point out here is with notifications, this is that link to the transaction preferences. This is where you turn it on individually for each user, what you wanted to have as a notification, and then it'll link back to that daily emails. Not every one of these will have that. Obviously, some will just occur as they happen, but some are set up to not ping you every time something happens, like, you know, timesheets, etc. So for you to have here, and then this would just be a representation of, hey, I showed you where those custom fields exist for managing. Obviously, this is more of like, oh yeah, that's why they're showing up here. That's why they're there. So, okay, so the other thing that I wanted to point out with employees is the individual employee themselves. So pretend that this is not my sandbox and I am not an administrator and I'm not in the employee screen. Maybe I'm somewhere else. Maybe I'm in my Today Creatives page, which is what regular user we want them to land in on. But if I click on my name, again, I have this tools to help me update my information. I can set up an image that then just appears here. If you have allowed them to manage their login information, they can manage it here. I can set up my settings of my time zones, or reminders, you know, notification controls, default pages. And that's where I mentioned before where you can, I can toggle and say, oh, my accounting page should be my home page. But again, you know, you can continue to reset it and they'll continue to change it back here. So it's better to have those discussions about it. And then for you as administrators, you have the more button where you can go to system settings where you can allow things to change or not change, right? And based on everybody or certain people, certain groups. So that's where that system settings, if you see a more button, more than likely there's a system settings. Every system settings is different for each screen, right? So you'll have that for this one. I like this too. Just an FYI, you can go to the help guide. Every month we do releases, so you can release or updates. You can see the release notes if we're doing some kind of maintenance, and then some other stuff here. But that's where we're at. Since I have it open, I think I would like to take the opportunity here to also mention that if you are reporting a bug to Workamajig, please note that we are asking for your help, because unless it is happening everywhere, we will tell you, yes, we see it. We need your help. We need to be able to replicate it. We need your steps. I know it's a pain, because I know, why can't we just fix it and see it? I get it. But that's the way that computers work, and we need your help on that. So one of the things that you can also help us with is including the error log. And that's what this is, to tell us if when you're triggering that error, you can include that with that. So I did see a hand go up. We don't have like where you can talk. So if you want to type it in chat or Q&A, you can get to it. Oh, okay, perfect. So it says, how did I get to the place where I am now? I clicked on my name on the top right corner. So I will do that again. I will click here, and that's where I'm at. And then I click on more, and that's where I'm at. So hopefully that helps. And that's why I was pointing this out to you, because as administrators, you should know that, hey, my team can do that. I should go see what they can do and make sure that I know what's happening. So you're welcome. So so we have those. How to get to that there. All right. Trying to think anything else before I move on that I want to talk about here. So I now want to discuss dashboards and other screens. So like I mentioned, with Workamajig, we have different screens that look different, right? Whether you are a basic user and these are my tasks, whether I'm a project manager and I want to see my list of projects and see this screen, and again, can't get into every screen, unfortunately, right? But the point, especially why I bring up those two screens, and it may apply to other screens, so I'll start with back to the Today Creatives, is because my more button, when it comes to the system settings, is going to allow me to shape this screen for my users. Why would I want to do that? Well, maybe they're not using it correctly. Maybe they're missing information. And this allows me to, I can't really peek into what they can see, but I can have control as to resetting what they see, so that I can tell them, look, I need you to find tasks at a certain date range. And that's a drop down as to the date range. I want you to be able to see tasks that are ready for you or not ready for you, be able to do things in this thing that would help you. And again, hard to get into each and every one of these, but the idea is that you have the ability as administrators to come and manage these screens for your users. And a lot of times we'll hear, hey, I can't see the next task, or a task is hiding from my user. Why is that? Come in here and take a look at what the settings, general settings are for them. They'll have to also, because we have a section for display options. This should really, another way of saying it really would be individual options, individual user options. And so you can templatize that for everyone or by group. And then what will happen is that when they log in next, right, they will, well, let me talk you through the entire thing. If I was to make a change and I was to click save, you're going to see this. And it's going to say, okay, you have made changes. However, I don't know if I should ignore any changes to display options because, again, your users may have already managed those themselves, or no, I want them to change because I keep getting these emails, or they keep telling me they can't see things, or I want us to have a better workflow and a process, and that starts with everybody getting a reset on their screen, and that's why this is in red. So I usually tell my clients when we're working on troubleshooting things to click on green. That way they don't annoy or have to, get the other set of emails. Hey, like, why, why did my things change? And that's maybe where you do have the conversation. Hey, I'm going to reset everybody's page here. Please note that. That way you avoid that extra communication with them. And they know that, hey, my administrator is doing this to help me, right? To know that I can see or can't see something specifically. So that's what that's for. But just note again that if I'm not an administrator, I'm only going to see display options. So I can override only the display options that I was set to, but hopefully to help me work better. Okay, yes, I know that I have it, but maybe I do want to see a longer range than 2 weeks. So maybe all, or maybe I want to just focus on what's or I want to see what's in the future. And so I don't want to see just the ones that are ready to be worked on. I want to see the ones, 6 months from now or whatever it is, if that's what I'm assigned or my process that I have with my team. So they're limited still, so they can't change everything. But that is just so that you're aware of what you're doing versus what they can do for that. So I do have a question. Is there a way as an admin to view another in Workamajig to view what they will see, what another employee sees, right? Unfortunately, no. I know there was an example in the Q&A given about insertion orders. And in this case, though, even though the answer is no, there's no way to do it. One other thing that I did skip, or I'm glad that you brought up because I did want to mention it, is that you as so I guess the responsibility really falls on both managers and users, but in the employee record, I'm going to pick on Sparkbulb here. Under the section where you manage, I think it's accounting, yes. So as you can see, Sparkbulb wants to, we talked about the general global settings for approvers, which is fine. But individually, I can see that I will approve Sparkbulb's time, expense reimbursement forms, credit cards, and there's a little blurb about credit cards there that you can hover and read. And then we have this, backup approver. Now, I wanted to explain this first, right? I approve Sparkbulb's things. But now if I go to me, I'm here somewhere. There I am. I obviously probably approve my own things except for this, but I know that I'm obviously approving Sparkbulb's things, right? So if I'm going to be gone, I need to select someone else to do the approvals for me while I'm gone. So Adam Sandler's going to do that. So I have to come in here to do it. But what if, and I guess to finish the thought, that way, if I was sent something, then it's going to go to Adam as well, so that Adam can approve it. So hopefully that helps answer the question of what happens when someone's gone. We use the backup approver tool. Now, what if, and so as a admin, obviously you should be able to get into your employees list and do that so that they come to you. But if I don't have access, if I'm not an administrator, I don't have access, but I am leaving, click on my name, and I can click on the pencil icon and I can select Adam here too, without having the access to the employee records, right? To even my own. So that hopefully helps. That's a great question. So you have it. And obviously, if it's a record, if that didn't happen, well, then you would have to reach out to an administrator to find that record, right, and have the rights to edit it. So that way you can change the approver at that point, right? But that would be the third way, the more specific to that transaction way of changing those approvers. So good question on that. I just wanted to point out here, I know I'm running towards the end of my hour, that with the other screen that I was going to show you with projects under project manager, same thing. There's a display options, which is the individual view, users view, and then management of the screen versus the system settings. And again, why isn't my project showing? We'll come and look at these settings, right? And so being aware of that is very helpful to note. You can obviously edit columns for different groups of people, just like any other table. What's unique about this one, and this is how we'll end it here, is that you can also create column sets. So this is different. So I like that you can, manage someone else's view, and if they don't have the access right to edit their own columns, well, oof, they have to go bother you, I guess, if you because you're limiting who can edit system settings and with those rights that we talked about. But if what we've done on this table, and it's on a few other tables, you can allow to toggle between different views or displays of those fields. So if I click on this one on edit column sets, I've set up one for webinars like this to say, okay, in the system settings, somebody's setting up all these fields, which is great. And that's the default layout, but I can allow by security group a different layout. So I'm not allowing someone to change it for everybody, but for themselves, they can get a different perspective of fields that are organized this way. So what does that mean? That means that once I have that set up, I can now see this field where it says this is the original default layout from the system settings under more, but under column sets, I can switch to the webinar one and I'll get a different order or different types of fields or setup, so that I at least feel like I have a little more power as a user that's not an administrator or a user that doesn't have those system settings to get in here. So that's what we have for you. Again, I'm trying to think of honorable mentions. Back in the admin button under system setup, I did not get a chance to discuss custom menu, but you can reorganize the menu for your team. This is a default. Some of that will be changed by how you've set up the rights. Hey, can they bill, right? Maybe they see this icon, but they don't see all these these other icons based on those rights. But everything outside of that, you can go into the custom menu and set up individually for each group those top level folders We call them folders, those icons, right? Because they contain other icons. And so you can do a new folder with a new icon, with a new name, with a new color. And that particular group will see those for them to obviously just have access or not be distracted or not have to worry about clicking on something that, you know, they shouldn't, and or to make sure that they feel comfortable, right, clicking on the things that they need to see. So you can customize the menu. The only caveat I would say is that when you do a custom menu and it does show the new menu, they can toggle back by clicking the show all apps icon at the bottom right. And that's okay. It will revert back to the custom menu once they go back to the menu. But, you know, again, is it going to be helping them? Will they even look down here in the bottom right? How many of us did we know that we have that? And how often is it annoying to have to click one more thing, right? So those users should be fine with the custom menu that you set up for them. And again, we'll have videos on and help guide articles on that. But I wanted you just to be aware of, as administrators, if you didn't know already, of that feature. So that's all the time I have for you guys today. I appreciate you guys joining. And if there's any other questions that you feel like we didn't get to or you wanted to ask further information on, please email support@workamajig.com. You do have an assigned account manager. If they haven't heard from you, we would like to hear from you, right? I'm talking even to my own, just so that we can help you out, and we can get you using the system more, and it's more helpful to your process. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.